Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to this segment of Coach Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. The recitation for the day is the 38th Pauri of Jup Pauri, which is read as follows. Jat pahara tiraj sunyar, ehran mat ved hatyar, pao khalla agan taptao, panda pao amrit tal, कड़िए शब्द सच्ची टकसाल जिनको नदर कर्म तिनकार नानक नदरी nadar nihal. Now this is the concluding stanza of Jup Pauri, and perhaps the metaphor that we can think about for the first 36 and coming to the 37th is like the climbing of the inner mountain of spiritual growth. And this is not an uncommon metaphor, and it is not an inept one because it reminds us to live life at an existential peak, living fully and intensely. So in speaking of the 5 khands in the previous 4 pauris, or the realms that a human needs to climb, metaphorically speaking, that is, we understood this journey to be an inner one and not to an outer physical location. The boundaries between these different planes are not concrete but fluid and represent psychological states of the mind that lead ultimately to an experience of the truth that is ineffable. For an individual who experiences this journey, living then becomes an existential peak. Our ordinary living, which is driven by narrow interests, riddled by anxieties, cravings, and the quest for more living, transforms into a transcendent affirmation of life. This stanza of Jup Pauri can be thought of as the essence of the entire text of Japji, and the allegory of a goldsmith that Guruji is using talks about an alchemical process to transform baser metals to gold, because that's what a goldsmith does. And it beautifully illustrates Guruji's foundational message that we have to transform our manmukh nature into that of a gurmukh. And that's the whole process. And this teaching has been amplified and explained by succeeding gurus in no uncertain terms. So in this stanza, Guruji lays out the process. It's almost like a practical manual for inner transformation. So let's see what this process is and what the toolbox looks like. We will read a literal translation first and then dwell on the message behind it. Jat pahara tiraj sunyar. In the smithy, pahara, which is like a workshop of continence or restraint, jat, that's what it literally means. Patience, dheeraj, is the goldsmith, sunyar. Aaron mat ved hatyar. Aaron, an anvil, mat, discernment, understanding. So discernment is the anvil, and knowledge, the tools that we need to use. Aaron mat, ved hatyar. Ved, of course, refers to knowledge, not specifically to the 4 Vedas. Knowledge in a very generic, broad sense. Hatyar, of course, tools. Pao khalla agan taptao. Pao is usually translated as fear of God, but a more appropriate translation we feel is divine awe. Khalla, of course, the bellows that fan the flame, that ignite the inner flame of intensity. Agan taptao. Panda pao amrit tittal. Panda, the crucible of the mind. In that crucible of love, pao in this case, pour the elixir of Guru wisdom, Amrit or Naam. Kadiye sabd sachi taksal. Cast, which means to karna, the coin of life, Shabad, in this mint of truth. For those who are so graced jinko nadar, it is their daily task. Karam tinkar, says Nanak, they lived in unalloyed bliss. Nanak nadari, nadar nihal. So the foundational requirement is jat, or self-discipline, the cultivation of the senses. This implies not a denial, but a shift in orientation, a harmonizing or spiritualizing of one's faculties. And this process of harmonizing or interiorizing is illustrated beautifully by Guru Amar Das Ji, where he says, for example, that the eyes or eyesight must be accompanied by the insight of seeing the same spark in all sentient beings. Hearing must learn to filter out unnecessary noise and listen to the truth. The tongue, for instance, must avoid gluttony, and so on. So when the senses are in harmony, the body develops the capacity to heighten its experience. That's the idea. Synchronization of the senses is the foundation for any accomplishment in life. And now harmony of the senses is possible only with dheeraj, the other requirement, the other tool in our toolbox, patience. And patience here implies forbearance and steadfastness. Together, they act as a check on the senses and their impulsive and addictive tendencies. But more importantly, patience trains the senses to defer gratification. And the deferral of gratification is the underpinning of all creativity and all civilization. So patience, along with self-discipline, teaches the deferral of instant gratification. And now patience and restraint must become the sport of the anvil of mat, right thinking or discernment. Ordinarily, our thinking is a habit of the mind, conditioned by our environment that causes our decisions and judgments to be somewhat biased. This mind then has to be fashioned on the anvil of right thinking, which is Gurmat. The mind then is shaped by the tools of knowledge, Ved, on the anvil of right thinking. We have to remember again that knowledge is used by Guru Nanak is a broad term that includes but exceeds its common usage as empirical knowledge. The knowledge talked about here is holistic, and while it includes cultivating the intellect, it also talks about developing the faculties of intuition. That includes mystical thinking as well, because we have to remember that the Guru is emphasizing a non-rational way of perceiving the world by deconstructing and displacing Haume, which is our thinking self or manmukh. As the metal is softened with the bellows of divine awe, the mind then is ready to be shaped. Agan taptao is the flame, the inner flame of intensity that is pushed in by the bellows of divine awe, vismad. So the point to be noted here is tap here does not refer to austerities as it is generally understood, because in Gurmat, the only austerity is to walk in hukam. That is the only austerity. A molded mind, a mind that is ready to be molded, is now a vessel of love. So from pao to pao, that can receive the molten gold, Amrit. And Amrit, of course, here means Nam, which is divine knowledge. And so that divine knowledge is now poured into a receptive mind. And this is the true mint. An authentic Sikh life can be likened to a lifelong alchemic process of apprenticeship to the Guru, where psychological lead, that is the manmukh state of mind, is cast in the mold of love to become spiritual gold, which is Gurmukh. What takeaways can we glean from this? The first thing to note is that Guruji has used the metaphor of a goldsmith and a smithy. That is a cue to us that the practice has to happen in the world and within the body and mind. Because remember, a goldsmith works with full concentration on creating products of value and beauty while seated in the midst of commercial noise and traffic, not very far from home. Likewise, an individual should be focused on sculpting body and mind while engaged in the affairs of the world. The second thing to note is that this practice is not dependent on any belief system. The output of this process is a transformed body, mind that is truly aesthetic. We leave you with this thought. Until the next time, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.